We're here at the Change Your World Cairo 2012 conference, and I'm delighted to welcome to the program this week Hossein Sukkari, Egyptian journalist and head of audience, Yahoo Middle East. Hossein, it's good to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
In the past, it was money and power that determined who could reach the masses through mass media. Today, this is no longer the case. Technology has made it easy for practically anyone to get their message across. How do you see the changing world of mass communication?
I think it changes our world fundamentally and dramatically. We, media professionals, no longer hold a monopoly on disseminating information to the masses. We lost it. And we didn't lose it because we wanted to. We lost it because technology enabled people who have messages that sometimes are much stronger than the messages that are being disseminated by the traditional media to communicate with the masses. So it is a new world in which we have to partner as media professionals with the people that we have been working for, so that we can work together in creating a new information environment that can integrate the extended capabilities that our communities have. No time in the past had we had the opportunity to extend our news gathering capabilities to every single corner on the earth. Whenever something happens today, you don't find just a video clip of it taken by a mobile, you find 3 or 4 taken from different angles. You find people verifying the information for you, correcting you when you make a mistake, saying actually this didn't happen, this clip is not from that incident, it's from another country or from another time. And people are doing that for you. In the past, you couldn't do that yourself. And now you are working with them in order to paint a closer to reality picture of our truth.
To what extent should journalists incorporate citizen journalism in their work? What is the right balance? Is there a right balance?
In our world today, there is no right and wrong. There are rights and wrongs, and you know them. But there is not one single truth, and there is not one single right. I think there is a fundamental professional issue when it comes to citizen journalism and integrating user-generated content in the traditional formats that we have. And one of the key issues is the fact that users are much more advanced than journalists, in my view. I could see users moving fluently between different platforms, use Facebook, Twitter, news, TV, radio. They do that all the time at the same time. And professionals reluctant to understand our new media capabilities and often go on denial by pretending or claiming that the quality or the authenticity or the accuracy of information or views gathered and disseminated by individuals are of a lesser value than theirs, and they are totally wrong.
Mainstream journalism versus citizen journalism. What do you see as the constraints and limitations of each?
Difficult to see boundaries today. I think we need to redefine our understanding so that we can redefine the boundaries. Because when you read the discourse around these issues, you get the impression that people are talking about two segregated environments. You know, an environment where journalists live and they don't use new media tools, and an environment where people live, unprofessional, pretentious journalists who would like to take our space. And this world has been dominated by people who fluently use new media tools and platforms. And it's not true. Journalism is journalism. And new media has extended our capabilities as journalists to do things that we didn't do before. Now, we have the same constraints when we work online as the constraints that we have when we work in traditional platforms. That doesn't change the game. What changes the game is our understanding of the value of the information and the views and the flavors that people provide us with, and the extended news gathering capability that people provide us with when they use these tools. And they shouldn't have the boundaries that we have. You know, our boundaries stem from our adherence to professional guidelines when we work, and these are professional guidelines that every single profession should have. Doctors have guidelines, lawyers have guidelines, and journalists have guidelines. And these guidelines apply, whether we work in a newspaper, a TV channel, or on the web. Users do not have the same guidelines. They have as much guidelines as me talking to you in a coffee shop. They do whatever they like. And we accept it or don't accept it, people accept it or they don't accept it, it's up to them. So that environment should be enabled to continue to be a free environment and an environment that protects individual rights to express their views freely. Our environment should continue to be governed, not restricted, by guidelines and by ethical norms of conduct.
I'm quoting you. You said objectivity is at best an aspiration. Can you elaborate?
People have been toying with the concept of objectivity, and there is an assumption that objectivity is an absolute. Even, and I found, well, actually, the rest of the phrase is that objectivity at best is an aspiration, and in most cases is a pretentious claim. So objectivity is not really that absolute that I can claim for myself. I am as credible as a journalist when I do my best and when I aspire to verify the facts, the figures, the input that can be there in my story. Now, I cannot claim anything to be the absolute reality or the absolute truth, but I do my best, and that's the aspiration to be objective. In most cases, people assume that their subjectivity is objective. So they tell you, okay, well, I'm objective. You cannot be objective, That's my objective view. You cannot have an objective view. As a view, it's a subjective representation of your thoughts. It cannot be objectivity. Objectivity is held by God. Nobody can claim to be objective absolutely. But we can all claim, if we are good journalists, to be aspiring to be objective. We do our homework well. We cover our issues well. We try as much as possible to get as many perspectives into the realities that we come across. Have we got it all? Definitely not. Can we get it all? Definitely not.
This next question is one that has been asked many times, but I'll ask it again. Was the 25th of January revolution a Facebook, an e-revolution, do you think?
It has been instigated to an extent and galvanized by activities in the electronic sphere, But when you manage to go to Tahrir Square and talk to people, these are people whose frustrations and disappointment with the daily humiliation that they face is what made this revolution. And that is an aspect that most people forget, in my view. I mean, I do come to Cairo occasionally, and I cannot claim to have lived over the past year in Cairo more than 2 months at maximum. But I feel sad when I see that people think, and I could be totally wrong, that this was about toppling a government or ousting a president. It was a cry against human rights abuses that have been taking place on daily basis in police stations and in the streets of Egypt. And it is something that people came to know, again back to social media, because of the leakage that we have seen over the past years of video clips gathered by the masses and filtered through to appear on Facebook pages and on the Twitter sphere to open our eyes to something that was happening very close to us, maybe to classes of society that we do not belong to, but it created that anxiety around the status of human rights abuse in this country. Now, to reduce that into an assumption that this revolution is about a person or a government or even a regime, I think is a falsification of reality. It's about a state of mind. It's about social tolerance. It's about social acceptance. It's about respect. It's about dignity. And that is the aspect that we should not forget. And that is the aspect that has been highlighted and polished by what I claim to be a newly emerging electronic conscience of individuals who, across boundaries of culture, developed a very humane understanding of reality and an aspiration that everybody should be respected, regardless to class and wealth, and everybody should be given the right to express their views, and everybody should be protected from humiliation by the establishment or the authorities.
What has happened since? Are activists still using Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube to further their cause?
No, actually, aunts and grannies are using that. I mean, everybody is using social media now. We saw a surge in in the internet activities in Egypt and in the Middle East in general. And I'm not, the best person to remember the figures, but you can see that it in some cases tenfold. In our case in Yahoo, the closure of the internet for a few days in Egypt resulted in a surge of our traffic by something like 25% in 4 days. And these are huge increases. So everybody is really now interested in social media, individuals, regardless to age and generation, and authorities. We have the electronic committees now and electronic activities instigated by government and establishments to sort of infiltrate the Twitter sphere and the Facebook sphere to sort of either tarnish the reputation of certain individual activists or falsify realities for people who are new to this sphere.
If you're a journalist, can you be an activist? Because during the 25th of January uprising, it was difficult to draw the line between the two.
A difficult one, but I think it's possible. And I think people have just to be clear about what we mean by being an activist while being a journalist. I often quote the example of my life in the BBC, where my organization at the time, or the BBC at the time, and still has very strict guidelines as to what you can do in public and what you cannot. And as a journalist working for the BBC, you cannot express your own views about any controversial issues. And some people lost their jobs for that. You could be advocating what you believe is a good cause, but still you're not allowed to. And I always and often quote the example of Richard Sambrook, who left the BBC almost around the same time when I left it. And he tweeted a very interesting tweet at the time. He said, "People ask me, what will you do when you leave the BBC? I will have views, strong ones." Because he felt deprived from the ability, and sometimes you can say the right, to express your views. But that's the organization we worked for. Almost a year after I left the BBC, whenever people ask me any questions, I hesitate to have a very clear stance, because I have been, for about 15 years, within the constraints of not being able to express myself freely, because this is the boundaries of the profession and an organization that I have accepted, has not been enforced on me. I went to work for the BBC, and that's what I accepted to do. Coming out of it, I can easily say that this is one school of journalism. It is not the school. It is not the absolute best reality that we can have in journalism. You still can work as a journalist, exposing angles that society does not see. You don't have in every single piece of work to have every single angle in it. You cannot always have the balance of having the pros and the cons in the same article or the same report. You can freely cover the angles that you believe matter, because everybody else is covering a different angle. The dilemma is, if your activism enforces upon you to falsify reality, and you know that, then you have betrayed your profession, you have betrayed your audience, you have betrayed yourself. If you know, for example, if you're an activist for a particular cause and you hear a rumor about, 100 people or 50 people have been tortured somewhere, and you feel as a journalist this is not credible, and you haven't done any checks and balances to verify that, and you happily disseminated this because you assume that this government or this particular government abuses human rights anyway, then you have betrayed yourself and betrayed your profession.
So always verify the facts.
You have to verify the facts regardless. Even if the party that